I was sitting at my kitchen table at 6 in the morning, both hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I had not yet touched, staring at a woman I did not know. She was asleep on my couch in a gray wool peacoat she had refused to take off the night before. Her hair was dark, fanned across the armrest, and she was breathing slow and even in the way people do when they have finally stopped running from something. On the kitchen counter behind me, her phone had just buzzed. I had not touched it, but the screen lit long enough for the name to register before it went dark again. Dad, Victor Ashby. Victor Ashby, senior founding partner of Ashby and Meridian Development. The man who had built one of Vancouver's most respected commercial real estate firms from a single office in Gastown 30 years ago. The man whose name was on the letterhead I had been signing my timesheets under for the past 3 months. I set my mug down and sat very still. Let me back up. My name is Logan Prescott. I am 37 years old, and I work as a quantity surveyor for Ashby and Meridian Development, a mid-size commercial development firm based out of Vancouver's Yaletown district. I grew up in Kelowna, 4 hours east by highway, where my father was a plumber and my mother taught grade 5 at the elementary school 2 blocks from our house. They were not complicated people. You showed up. You did what needed doing. You did not make a fuss about it. I carried that with me, the way you carry something you never decided to pack. It was just always there. I had been in Vancouver for 6 years. The first 4 I was with Amy. We met through mutual friends at a trivia night in Kitsilano, got serious fast, moved in together, and then spent the better part of 2 years quietly discovering that we wanted different things from a life, neither of us able to say it out loud until we finally did. She moved back to Kelowna to be near her family. I stayed. I kept the apartment, a 2-bedroom on West 4th that cost me more per month than I would like to admit, because I had built something here and I was not ready to pull it up. After Amy left, I fell into a routine that was functional, not much else. I went to work. I came home. I cooked dinner, usually something simple, pasta or whatever fish was on sale at the market on Broadway, and read for an hour before bed. I was not unhappy exactly, I was just existing inside a life that had lost some of its shape, like a sweater washed too many times that still fits but doesn't quite sit right anymore. Victor Ashby ran his company the way a contractor runs a job site. Clear expectations, no tolerance for wasted time, and an instinct for knowing exactly when something was off before anyone else said a word. I had been there 3 months, still inside my probationary period, still proving every morning that I deserved the desk they had given me. The only person I was close to was Derek, another surveyor on my team, who had been at the firm for 4 years and had taken it upon himself to make sure I didn't disappear into my own head entirely. Derek was nothing like me. He talked constantly, laughed at everything, and seemed to know everyone in any room he walked into. He called me the quietest, loud thinker he had ever met, which I think was his way of saying I was too much in my head and not enough anywhere else. He was probably right. That Friday, Derek insisted we go out with a group from the office to a pub in Gastown. I told him I was tired. He told me I was always tired, and that being tired was not the same thing as needing rest. So I went. The pub was packed for a Friday. High ceilings, exposed brick, the noise of a dozen conversations layered over each other. I found a spot near the end of the bar and ordered a pint I didn't particularly want, already calculating how early I could leave without being rude. That was when I noticed her. She was 3 stools down, alone, a half-finished glass of red wine in front of her and another one already being poured. She was still wearing her coat, that gray wool peacoat, buttoned to the throat like she had come straight from somewhere formal and hadn't had the energy to take it off. Her eyes were red, not from crying only, but from the particular exhaustion that comes from a day that has taken more than you had to give. Her phone was face up on the bar and it kept lighting up. The same name over and over, Brendan. She was not reading the messages. She was looking straight ahead at the row of bottles behind the bar, and every time the screen lit up, something in her jaw tightened just slightly and then released. I watched this happen 3 times before I understood what I was looking at. I moved down the bar. She looked at me with a flatness in her eyes that was not quite unwelcoming, just used up. "I don't need company," she said. I told her I wasn't offering any, just wanted to make sure she had a way home. She laughed once, short and dry. "I'm fine." She was not fine. She stood up 20 minutes later, and I watched her find her balance against the bar stool, with the careful concentration of someone working hard to appear steady. When she came back, she sat down and stared at her phone, which had gone dark again. I asked if there was someone I could call for her. She looked at me then, really looked for the first time. "My grandmother died this morning," she said. "I've been at the funeral home since 8. I don't want to call anyone. I just wanted to be somewhere loud enough that I didn't have to think." I said I was sorry. She picked up her wine glass, looked at it, then set it back down. "I don't actually know where I live," she said, and there was something almost amused in her voice, the way exhaustion sometimes tips sideways into something that sounds like humor. "I know it's a condo. I know it's downtown. I cannot for the life of me remember the street." She was not being dramatic. She genuinely could not retrieve the information. I could see it, the blankness behind her eyes when she tried. I had two choices. I could call her a cab to somewhere, anywhere, and hope she figured it out. But Brendan's name kept coming to mind, that name flashing on her screen every few minutes, like a signal she was trying to ignore. Taking her somewhere alone by cab, to a hotel she had never been to, felt like leaving a problem I had seen coming. The second option was the only one that felt safe. My apartment, 3 kilometers away. I chose the second option and hated myself for it, the same way you hate yourself for an instinct that is correct but inconvenient. I drove her back to Kitsilano in silence, her head against the passenger window, the city lights blurring past. I helped her up the stairs, one hand at her elbow. I got her to the couch, unzipped her boots so she'd be comfortable, pulled a blanket over her, and set a glass of water and 2 Tylenol on the coffee table. Then I found a pen and the grocery receipt from my jacket pocket, the only paper I had, and wrote on the back of it, "You're safe. This is my apartment. I'm in the bedroom. Logan." I propped it against the glass. That was when I went to put the pen away and walked past the kitchen counter where her phone was. The screen lit up with the name I had not been looking for. Dad, Victor Ashby. I stood there for a long time. Then I went to my bedroom, closed the door, and lay down on the floor with a blanket folded under me, because offering her the bed had felt presumptuous and taking the couch back had felt worse. The hardwood was cold. I stared at the ceiling until somewhere past 2 in the morning when I finally fell asleep. She was still on the couch when I woke at 6. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, and that is where we began. She woke around 7:30. I heard the couch shift, then slow footsteps, then silence that meant she had found the receipt. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding it between 2 fingers, her coat creased from sleeping in it, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. "Logan," she said, reading from the receipt. I nodded. She looked around the apartment, the dish rack on the counter, the row of project binders on the shelf, the pair of running shoes by the door I hadn't put away. "You slept on the floor?" I told her I had. I told her nothing else had happened, and nothing would have. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Most people would have just left me at the bar." "I'm not most people," I said. It was not a boast, it was just the truth said plain. She ordered a rideshare on her phone and left 20 minutes later, thanking me at the door with an expression I could not quite read. Somewhere between gratitude and something that looked like recognition. She did not give me her name. I did not ask. I figured that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. The following Wednesday, Derek stopped beside my desk on his way to the kitchen. "Victor's daughter is in the building today," he said, nodding toward the glass corridor. "She's working on the communications campaign for the Berard project." I looked up. Through the glass I could see her. She was in a tailored blazer now, hair pulled back, walking beside Victor's assistant with a laptop under her arm, completely composed, completely different from the woman who had fallen asleep in a peacoat on my couch. Her name, I found in the company directory that afternoon, was Nina. She walked the length of the corridor, and near the end, her gaze swept briefly across the open-plan floor. It landed on me for less than 2 seconds. Nothing in her expression changed. She looked away and kept walking. She had recognized me, and she had decided in that fraction of a second not to show it. I didn't know if that was a kindness or a warning. Over the following weeks, Nina appeared at the office more regularly. The Berard project, a mixed-use development going up on the north shore of False Creek, gave her legitimate reasons to be there. She had meetings with the project managers. She had questions about the construction timeline for the public communications calendar she was building around it. For those questions she came to me. She would pull a chair beside my desk and ask about sequencing, about what the excavation phase meant in terms the public could understand, about how to explain a concrete pour to someone who had never been on a job site. The questions were specific enough to be genuine. She listened the way not many people do, not waiting for her turn to speak, actually absorbing what I said before she responded. There were other things I noticed, slowly over time. She brought coffee for the floor one Thursday morning, a tray from the cafe downstairs, cups already made. When she handed mine to me, it was black, no sugar. She had not asked. She spoke to Derek once or twice, but never asked him about me directly. Instead, she'd mention in passing that she was trying to understand the estimating team's workflow, and Derek, being Derek, would fill in details without being prompted. One afternoon, I found her standing at the window of the main meeting room, looking out over False Creek while I walked a junior colleague through a set of cost projections on the whiteboard. I glanced up mid-sentence. She was not watching the whiteboard. A week after that, she left her laptop bag on a chair after everyone else had filed out of the meeting room. I picked it up and walked it down to the communications wing. She took it from me with a quiet smile. "I keep doing that," she said. I nodded and went back to my desk and thought about it for the rest of the afternoon and into the evening and again the next morning. The evening she told me about Brendan, we were the only ones left in the building. The lights on the main floor had switched to their low after-hours setting, and the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows had that particular quality, amber and blue, that only happens in Vancouver when the rain has just stopped and the air gone clear. She was sitting on the edge of the meeting room table, shoes off, a cup of cold tea in her hands. She told me that Brendan was the son of a longtime client of her father's, someone their families had known for 15 years, someone who golfed with Victor on weekends and attended their Christmas dinners. The relationship had been, in Nina's words, less chosen than assumed. For 2 years she had played her part, but Brendan was the kind of person who called it love while practicing something else entirely. He checked her location. He called her workplace when she didn't answer her phone. He managed her social calendar the way a property manager handles a building, nothing in or out without his knowledge. He never raised his voice. He never left a mark. He just made the world smaller until Nina could not remember what it had looked like before him. The night of her grandmother Margaret's funeral, the night I had found her at the pub, was the night she had finally ended it. She had told him that morning, before the service, because she could not stand the idea of grieving beside someone who made grief feel like a performance she was obligated to give. She had gone to Gastown that night because she needed noise and strangers, and nothing that required her to be anyone's anything, because she had nowhere else in the world she wanted to be. "I wasn't just drunk," she said, looking down at the tea going cold in her hands. "I was untethered. For the first time in 2 years I had nothing holding me in place, and the first person I met was you." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. The weight of it was enough on its own. 10 days later, Brendan walked into Ashby and Meridian under the cover of a routine partnership meeting between his family's firm and ours. He wore the kind of suit that communicates money has never been a concern. He shook hands in the lobby. He smiled the smile of someone who had rehearsed it that morning in a mirror. He saw Nina standing near my desk, going over a timeline printout I had marked up for her. The smile did not disappear, it reconfigured. That same afternoon, I was at my desk close enough to the hall to hear what was said through Victor's open doorway. Brendan leaned against the frame with the ease of a man who had spent his whole life in rooms where he was welcome. "Victor," he said, his voice calibrated to carry just far enough. "Did you know someone on your estimating team took Nina back to his apartment the night of Margaret's wake?" He let it sit. He didn't add anything. He didn't need to. Every piece of context had been removed. The Tylenol on the table, the grocery receipt with 5 words, the floor, the door closed between us. What remained was the worst possible arrangement of true facts I had ever heard, and Brendan knew exactly how powerful that arrangement was. I sat still, was on the page, and I did not move it. Victor looked up slowly, his jaw set. Brendan found me alone near the stairwell later that afternoon. He had done his homework. He had obtained security footage from my building's lobby, 14 seconds of it, timestamp reading 12:47 a.m., showing me with one hand at Nina's back, guiding her through the entrance door. Grainy, no audio, no context, no receipt, no glass of water, no note, no floor. "You know what that looks like," he said. "The night of her grandmother's funeral. She was grieving and alone." His tone was almost conversational, almost kind. Everyone will know exactly what kind of person does something like that. I said nothing. There was nothing to say that he could not strip and redirect. Victor called me in the following morning. The lobby clip was paused on his laptop. He looked at me across the desk with the expression of a man who is working very hard to be fair to someone he is not yet certain deserves it. "Explain," he said. I told him everything. The state she was in, the address she could not remember. Brendan's name appearing on her screen every few minutes, which was exactly why I had not put her alone in a cab to somewhere unfamiliar. The Tylenol. The grocery receipt with 5 words on the back. The floor. The bedroom door closed. The rideshare she called in the morning. The fact that I had not known who she was until her phone lit up on the counter after she was already asleep. Victor was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I became aware of the ventilation and the rain against the windows 16 floors below. "I'll speak with Nina," he said. "You should," I said. 2 days later I was reassigned to a remediation project in Surrey, 45 minutes from the main office. Nothing to do with the Burrard development, nothing to do with Nina. Derek stopped by my new desk that afternoon. "You got moved," he said quietly. "It wasn't a question." I nodded. There was nothing else to say. The truth had been on my side the entire time, but Brendan had made sure it arrived at Victor's desk wearing the wrong clothes, and a truth that arrives in the wrong clothes does not always get a fair hearing on its first try. Nina found out within the day. She went to her father's office and closed the door behind her. I was in the hallway when it happened, passing through to hand off a file to one of the project managers. The glass wall gave nothing away in terms of words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was not defensive. It was not asking for anything. It was precise and unwavering, the voice of someone who had spent 2 years letting other people make decisions about her life, and had decided, clearly and finally, that she was done with that arrangement. She came out 11 minutes later. Her eyes were red, her posture was perfect. She walked past me without looking over. She did not need to. Brendan made one more approach in the parking garage that evening. He was leaning against his car with his arms crossed, watching me walk toward my truck with the particular ease of someone who believes the outcome is already settled. "She'll move on," he said. "She always does." I opened the truck door, sat down, and pulled out of the garage without a word. My hands were tight on the steering wheel the whole drive to Surrey, not from fear, from the effort of keeping everything I wanted to say locked behind my teeth where it belonged. A week later, a brown envelope arrived at my desk in Surrey with no return address. Inside was the gray wool scarf Nina had left at my apartment the night I had brought her home, folded carefully into a rectangle. Tucked inside the fold was a torn piece of grocery receipt, not the one I had written on, a different one. On the back, in her handwriting, "You wrote on the back of a receipt. I thought you should know. That matters." I read it twice. I put it in the inside pocket of my jacket. It stayed there. That Thursday evening, the buzzer at my apartment rang. I had been sitting on the couch rereading the same page of a novel for 20 minutes without taking in a single sentence. I went downstairs and opened the door. Nina was standing there in jeans and a heavy flannel shirt, her hair loose, holding a paper bag from a Vietnamese restaurant I recognized from her end of town. "I assumed you eat alone most nights," she said. "I do too." We sat on the floor of the living room because my kitchen table was buried entirely under Surrey project binders and a thermos I had not washed in 3 days, and neither of us suggested clearing it. She pulled out 2 containers of pho, passed me a set of chopsticks, and we sat cross-legged on the hardwood in the quiet that comes naturally between people who don't feel the need to fill every space with noise. She looked down at the floor at some point, then back up at me. "Is this where you slept?" she asked. I said it was. She went still for a while after that, turning something over. Then she set down her chopsticks and looked at me with an expression I had not seen from her before, open in a way that had clearly cost her something to arrive at. "I need to tell you something," she said. I waited. "I knew who you were before that night at the pub." I looked at her. "There was a company dinner in September," she said. "My father's anniversary event. Derek pointed you out across the room, said something about the new guy on the estimating team who was too quiet for his own good." She paused. "I noticed you. I found you in the staff directory after. I read your project history. I thought about you more than was reasonable for someone I had never spoken to." She picked up her chopsticks and set them down again. "Derek mentioned to someone that your group was going to Gastown that Friday. I went because I knew you'd be there. I didn't plan to get drunk. I didn't plan for any of what happened, but I planned to be in the same room as you, and I'm not going to sit on this floor and pretend otherwise." I sat there with a container of pho going cold in my lap, looking at the woman who had just told me that the most disorienting night of my recent life had not been entirely random after all. She had come looking for me. The reason she had given the world, that she was trying to drown the end of something in a loud Gastown pub, was true. But underneath it was a second truth she had carried quietly for months, and she had decided tonight was the night to put it on the table. "If we do this," I said slowly, "your father could let me go, you understand that?" She looked at me without blinking. "If he fires someone for being decent to his daughter, that tells me more about him than it does about you." I did not kiss her that night. We washed the takeout containers, side by side at the narrow kitchen sink, shoulders close but not quite touching. She left a little after 11. At the door, she turned back and held up the scarf which she had found folded on the chair where I'd left it. "I'm leaving this again," she said, "on purpose." Then she walked down the stairs and I stood at the door for a long time after her footsteps faded. The first month was quiet and entirely ours. She would arrive after work, leave her boots at the door, fold herself into the corner of the couch with her laptop, while I spread project files across the living room floor. I cooked. She brought wine, or sometimes just herself, and that was always enough. She started leaving things: a toothbrush in the bathroom cup, a pair of wool socks on the radiator, a library book on the coffee table with a transit transfer as a bookmark, each item placed with enough intention that I understood it was not careless. She was learning the apartment's particular logic: which burner ran too hot, which window you had to lift before you could push, which floorboard creaked if you stepped on its right side. She knew these things because she was paying attention, and she paid attention because she had chosen to be here. At 3 months, Victor asked me to lunch at a steakhouse on Robson Street. I walked in entirely convinced I was about to lose my job. He ordered a steak and sparkling water and looked at me across the white tablecloth for a long time before speaking. "Nina told me everything," he said, "about Brendan, about that night, about you." He was quiet while the waiter brought bread. "I don't like it," he said finally, "but you told me the truth when I asked, and I have not forgotten that." He did not shake my hand. He did not welcome me anywhere. He said he respected the truth, and in that moment, inside a situation that could still have cost me everything, that one sentence was exactly enough. At 6 months, the Burrard waterfront project reached completion: 18 floors of mixed residential and commercial, 2 years of estimating and costing finally made real in glass and steel and poured concrete. At the ribbon ceremony on a gray November morning in False Creek, Victor stood at the podium and named his team one by one. When he said my name, I looked out from the back of the crowd and found Nina standing beside her father's assistant near the edge of the gathering. She looked at me with an expression that nobody else in that courtyard could have translated. I could. Brendan made his final move around that time. He compiled the lobby footage again with a formal written complaint and sent it to Victor, recommending the firm review my suitability as an employee. Victor forwarded the email to me the same afternoon with a single line in the body: "Consider this matter closed." That was when I understood, without any remaining doubt, that Victor Ashby had decided where he stood, not because he liked me, not because he had stopped being protective of his daughter, but because he had weighed what he knew against what he had been told to believe, and he had chosen the harder, more honest version. That was the most Victor Ashby thing he could possibly have done, and it was the first time I understood that the quality I had feared most about him, that unflinching precision, could also be the quality that protected me. At 1 year, Nina moved in. Not to her father's house in Shaughnessy with the wide staircase and the view of the North Shore Mountains. To my apartment in Kitsilano, with the radiator that clangs through January, the kitchen window that sticks, and the single parking spot that floods when the drain backs up on the street outside. She arrived on a Saturday morning in early autumn with 2 bags and the scarf. I stood in the doorway watching her come up the last flight of stairs. When she set the second bag down in the hall, I said, "You're trading a house in Shaughnessy for this." She walked to the row of coat hooks by the door. She lifted the scarf and hung it on the hook nearest the entrance, smoothed it once with 2 fingers until it sat straight. "I'm not trading anything," she said. "I'm arriving." The scarf stayed on that hook, not lost in a pub, not left on a bar stool, not returned through a sealed brown envelope with a note that took courage to write, hung deliberately, by a woman who had spent years keeping everything close and tightly managed, and who had finally found a place where she didn't need to. Some evenings I sit on the couch and let myself travel back to that 6 a.m. kitchen, the untouched coffee, the woman I didn't know breathing slow in the next room, the phone screen lighting up with a name that could have ended everything before it started. Every reasonable instinct I had said to leave her at the bar. Not your problem, Prescott. In the morning, you forget it happened. But I stayed long enough to find a grocery receipt and write 5 words on the back of it. I stayed long enough to put 2 Tylenol and a glass of water on the coffee table so that someone I had never met could wake up and know, before anything else, that they were safe. That small and entirely ordinary thing, that was what changed everything. Not because I did something brave. There was nothing brave about any of it. I just stayed 1 minute longer than was comfortable and made sure a person knew they were not alone. She came into my life as a stranger who needed somewhere safe to land. I gave her my couch. She gave me back something I had not fully realized I was still missing. If you have ever stayed when everything in you said to go, I want to hear about it. Leave your story in the comments below. And if this one meant something to you, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I bring you a new story every single week right here on his Private Stories.